So organisms are pretty amazing, but now we're going to start to dive into how do organisms get to be the way they are? How do they survive? So first, let's look at what a cell is doing during its individual life. Any given cell goes through what's called the cell cycle. So if I have a blood cell or a bone cell or a skin cell, it's going to grow, it will copy its DNA, and it's going to divide and make another cell. And it will continue to do that throughout its life. So there's two different types of cell division. We are going to focus on mitosis, but I do want to mention the other one just so you're aware that it exists. So mitosis is the division of our body cells. So our skin cells, our muscle cells, our nerve cells, red blood cells, white blood cells, and bone cells. When our body cells divide, they start up here with a parent cell, and it has 46 chromosomes. When the cell goes through this process, it has to multiply its chromosomes, so it will have 92 chromosomes. So 46 makes copies of each one, so now it has 92, so that it can split in half and result in two identical new cells. We call them daughter cells, that each have 46 chromosomes. So the two new cells each have 46 chromosomes. And it does this for a variety of reasons. One, it does it so the organism can grow, can get taller, it can get bigger, but so the organism can grow. It also does it to repair, and it does it for asexual reproduction in unicellular organisms. There is another type of cell division, and this cell division is called meiosis. Now, meiosis happens in reproductive cells only, so either in the sperm or the egg. This is a bigger process. This process starts with a cell that has 46 chromosomes. It doubles just like in mitosis, so it has 92. This is a simplified model of it. It divides, and ultimately it divides again. There's actually several more steps to this, but in the end, it ends up with 4 different or unique cells that have 23 chromosomes each when we're talking about humans. And we'll get into other organisms and how many chromosomes they have a little later. This is how the reproduction of sperm and egg cells occurs in any organism that would have a sperm or an egg cell. So any organism that would have sexual reproduction. So with that, I just want to really focus on mitosis today. So the rest of what we'll discuss is all about just the body cells. I just wanted you to know that meiosis exists and that it happens in reproductive cells. So let's bring our focus back to reproductive cells, or sorry, not reproductive cells, back to body cells, and discuss why would body cells need to divide. So body cells, cell division is super, super important. If I'm a unicellular organism, I depend on cell division, mitosis, in order to make a new bacteria cell, in order to make a new protist, a new archaea, or a new fungi. So we call that reproduction. Unicellular organisms use cell division, mitosis, in order to reproduce. Multicellular organisms, so plants and animals, use cell division for growing, getting bigger, repairing, and reproduction only in their reproductive cells. But that's meiosis, not mitosis. So let's dive into each of these a little bit more deeply. So growing. Cells do have a limit on how large they can become. So if I'm a single-celled organism, I get so big, I divide, and that's called reproduction. I make a new copy of myself. But if I'm a multi-celled organism, I'm going to grow larger, going to divide, and then I'm going to have more cells. So as multicellular organisms divide, they start as one organism or one cell, they get bigger, they double, they get bigger, they divide again, and they continue dividing. And as they divide, they do eventually start to specialize. And that's how our organisms become more complex and more developed. So even humans start as a single cell, and over time, their cells become specialized, and eventually we end up with all the different varieties that we've learned about: bone, skin, muscle, blood, and nerve, as well as many other types. But our body also uses cell division, uses mitosis in order to repair itself. If you get a paper cut, if you break a bone, if you're injured in some way, then your body has to fix itself. The only way to repair that injury is to make new cells. So if I get a cut, my cells have to divide, make more cells of that skin cell or that bone cell if I've broken a bone, to replace the injured or old cell. Our cells also get older. So our skin cells, for example, they get old really quickly and they shed away and they need to be replaced. If our skin cells were never replaced, we would run out of skin very quickly and we'd just have muscle showing. So as our cells die, they have to be replaced so that we have cells to be able to survive. The final reason that our cells need to be able to divide, to go through mitosis, is for reproduction. And this one actually isn't for us. Mitosis is used for reproduction in only unicellular organisms. So in unicellular organisms, the cell doubles its nucleus, starts to divide, and eventually you end up with two individual cells. If that didn't happen, bacteria, protists, fungi would never survive. You would have one organism and you would never be able to have a new one without the ability to divide. Multicellular organisms do use meiosis, a different process, to make their reproductive cells to allow for reproductive in those organisms. So cell division, super important for the survival of species to be able to reproduce. But as we're talking about mitosis, that reproduction is really only unicellular organisms. But that doesn't always happen perfectly. So when that cell division doesn't go quite right, it results in what's called a mutation. So mutations are the result of cell division not happening properly. And what happens when the cell division doesn't go exactly right is that the mutations, are a change in the DNA. And that change in the DNA ultimately shows a change in the organism's traits. Sometimes it's very minor, sometimes it's much more obvious.